Hey, this is Brad Anderson here. I want to thank everybody for listening, and the best way for you to get in my head is to listen to InYourHeadOnline.com.
All right, we're back, and we're joined by Brad Anderson. Welcome to In Your Head.
Hey, guys, I'm glad to be on here. Looking forward to it. I want to apologize for no showing on the time you had me booked here before, so hopefully I can make it up for you guys tonight.
That's no problem. Things happen. I appreciate you, explaining what happened and everything, so that's cool, because, every once in a while there'll be somebody no-shows, and they won't even say they're sorry.
Yeah, well, that's I was raised, I hate that it even happened with you guys, but...
Yeah, that's no problem. Things happen, not a problem at all. But, first thing I want to ask is, we actually talked about this earlier on the show, is on your MySpace you used to have, the nickname Unnatural Selection on there. Mm-hmm. Just want to know what that meant.
Oh, I kind of always felt like the black sheep in the Anderson gene pool. Kind of always the outside one that never quite got in, and... I don't know. I always felt like a little bit of a rebel in a way. It was just kind of like a little inside joke. I put a lot of stuff on there, both personal and joke personal too, to kind of let out a little bit of stuff. I've enjoyed doing that the last 6 months on the MySpace thing. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, let everybody know it's myspace.com/Anderson Wrecking Crew.
That's my current one there.
Yeah. Oh, you have another one too?
Yeah, no, because I changed the name from I changed the name from the Unnatural Selection thing or whatever, but I guess that's what it is now. I don't even know.
Yeah, you can always go to the In Your Head one. He's up in the top friends list.
Yeah, okay.
He's right next to George South, I believe.
Oh God.
Any good George South stories? He's a big fan. He's one of our favorites here on the show.
George, I don't know. George, George is just a class to himself. He runs shows. He's a great guy, but I know when him and Stallion used to run the PWF, which was, I think, called Professional Wrestling Federation, the joke amongst all the boys was it stood for Please Wrestle Free, because he wouldn't pay anybody. And, you'd work, and he'd have all these jabronis that he was training, and he'd give them, diet sodas and stuff, the 2 liters that were left over in the concession stands to pay these guys for wrestling, one of his shows. And that was his payoffs for the boys.
Oh, man. But, tonight, kids, you get some Pepsi.
Yeah, here, kid. Yeah.
You said earlier, you used the name Unnatural Selection because you kind of felt like the rebel. Do you think having the Anderson name, I guess it was a little easier for you to get into wrestling, but at the same time, was it harder for you, to live up to the name once you were in it?
Yeah, it was really crazy, obviously very easy. I mean, a week after I graduated high school, I was on TBS doing my first match with the Fantastics. I had a hood on, though, but that was kind of how they did it. I would do some TVs as Agent Steel. And then I would do house shows. If I was a babyface, I'd go out there as Brad Anderson. If I'd do a heel, I'd be Agent Steel. Because they would let you work, the house shows. You didn't get squashed so much on TV. But, yeah, the first day in, Flair grabs me back in the dressing room at the TBS studio, which really isn't much of a dressing room. It's just this big area with a bunch of set stuff on it. And he's like, he grabs me and he says, everybody listen, over all the years that Gene Anderson ever got stiff on you and stretched you, here's your chance to get him back right now. Here's his kid. Right here, whoever gets him, I didn't know who I was working with yet. And they're like, whoever gets him, be as stiff as you want. And I'm already about to crap in my pants, my first match, and, just all the nervousness involved with that. And, so yeah, that
was there anybody who took Flair up on that?
No, you know what? No, he was ripping.
Right.
Rick loved Dad to death. I mean, literally the night my father passed away, we were home an hour and Flair was over at our house, just torn up. He was the first guy that came by. The night Dad passed away. He loved him to death. And I mean, that was pretty much the consensus. It was, Dad was always stiff with guys in the ring, but he was straight up with them all the time. Mm-hmm. So, no, I never had anybody out trying to shoot on me to, get back at Dad or anything like that. But, but it was just a big
just let everybody know, in case they don't know, that you're Gene Anderson's son.
Yeah.
Now that I guess you're not related to Ollie, by blood, but did you, consider him like an uncle?
Yeah, I did. So 2 reasons was I had a real family, I guess, that was my dad's family that he never wanted me to be around much for good reasons. He never wanted me to be around him much for good reasons, and I didn't have any family. I didn't know what family was, so Ollie was the closest thing. I used to play with his kids, and we'd go over there all the time, and he's not an uncle from what I know uncles to be now, but he was the closest thing I had to an uncle growing up.
There's always a lot of rumors that that the Andersons, when they were trying to train somebody, they would stretch them pretty good. Anything like that happen to you?
No, but I was there from the age of probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad used to take me to him. Dad was really, he always was a man's man, and he was going to raise me that way. So he used to take me down there, and I'd watch these tryouts, and I would be terrified. These guys would be in there squealing for their lives,
Right.
They'd run these guys to death, have them do squats, push-ups, just so that they're jello by the time they get in the ring. And, I'll never forget this one. Ollie had some guy that some mark showed up, and he has his hood, and he has packets of ketchup, and he's smarting off at his mouth. And Ollie got in there and stretched him real good. And the guy came out and went out. Ollie told me to get the hell out of the ring. The guy leaves. Comes back with a pole with a cinder block, how they used to have the old ropes around the ring, that kind of gimmick. And he said he was going to hit Ollie with it. So Ollie got him back in the ring, and Ollie hooks him and puts his finger in his eye socket. In his eyeball socket. And the guy is screaming. I'm sitting there, I was 10 maybe. I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, it was like, you ever come back around here, kid, But they'd get guys in there and just, you want to be a wrestler and just beat them to death. But, that was they're looking back now, they protected the business, They had all these marks that wanted to be wrestlers, and you know what, they're like, you want to be a wrestler, this is, this, you think it's fake, this, that, whatever, this is what it is, So, they didn't just do it maliciously, sometimes, but, yeah. And, I came when I was about...
Was that Barb?
I was going to say that there's some stories going around that they would stretch people and take their money intentionally to stop them coming back, just so they could pocket the fee. Is that people who were stretched to the point where they walked away just trying to save face a little bit, or did that kind of thing actually go on?
Later on, I know Dad and Nelson had a wrestling school, and they would stretch guys just as bad. And they would take guys through their school that made it through the training, and they would legitimately tell guys, go home, you're not going to make it. Years ago when they used to do the Coliseum, I believed that they would just stretch guys and send them home. They didn't have a wrestling school. I think once or twice ever did I ever see anybody that ever made it out of years of, dozens of guys at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling bad for those guys, because I remember thinking, God, they're just going to beat the hell out of them and send them home, But then again, on the other hand, most of them were just big fat pieces of garbage. That, you know what I'm saying? They legitimate. They just were fat guys who thought I could be a wrestler. I never remember seeing anybody thinking, God, that's a good-looking guy. So I guess it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch Tough Enough when it was on TV?
Oh yeah.
Since you saw your dad and your uncle or whatever training guys, so what did you think of Tough Enough?
Oh, I thought it was kind of a joke. Breaking guys, that they trained and being trained by them. I remember just being beaten to death. What they did on there with those guys was so. But, it's a different business they're training them for, though, now, too, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how you train a guy these days. Take gymnastics first. I don't know. Because, it's more a bunch of aerial flips than anything getting on the mat and working. Mm-hmm. But they did. I saw them get them tough on those guys sometimes, and, but, I remember taking backdrop after backdrop after backdrop. You'd have to do 10 right, you do one wrong, you start back over at 1, that kind of thing. One thing that surprised me one time was I think it was 89, they had the Baltimore Bash, or Clash, something that whatever the big summer one was they did, and they had Flair and Luger up for the title match. And Flair asked me and Tommy Angel if we'd go up to Mooresville, where Nelson Royal's training place was at, because he wanted to train with Luger for this match, because, you know, I like Lex. He was always straight up with me, but he was obviously a horrible wrestler.
Right.
So we got up there, and because I was about Flair's size at the time, and so was Tommy Angel. Flair wanted to choreograph it, and me be, you know, Flair, and Luger be himself, so they could do it. And we got up there and started doing stuff, and I mean, like I said, we're taking backdrop after backdrop, and Flair called a spot for Luger, and we shot him off and went to give him a backdrop, and he comes up short, he stops. He goes, "Oh, I can't do it. And I look at Tommy, and Tommy looks at me, and we're like, he's like, well, if the people were out there, you know, my adrenaline would be up and stuff, but I can't take a backdrop here, you know, I can't do that. I'm thinking, oh, who trained this mother? You know, I mean, good Lord. I mean, I know Dick Murdoch used to rib him on the plane all the time. He'd tell him he'd teach him a headlock takeover for $100 because, you know, Luger walked in with some big contract and couldn't do a headlock takeover.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Murdoch used to rib him all the time.
Now, you know, someone like that who comes in with like a big contract, do you think they have like less respect for wrestling? Or
you know, I think it's situational. You know, Luger was always like somebody, for instance, like that. I mean, when you would walk around Luger in a dressing room, you'd think he was the biggest a-hole there was. I mean, he used to help. He would take me in his car with him in rental cars. I mean, and I used to hear him talk about, actually me and Trent Knight, who was a job guy for WCW in the late 80s, he would take us both because we couldn't afford anything. And, he'd talk to us, you guys are starting out. So he was just a mixed up, I don't think he had the proper foundation of training, and respect from when it started. So, it's hard to say. Mm-hmm. It usually works out that way, that they get a bigger head than they do want to learn anything.
Oh, you got a caller. You got Brian Jones on the line. You got a question for Brad Anderson?
Yeah, my question was about the whole, I know, was it you that was in that whole Zan Panzer outfit?
Yes.
Back in the early 90s. Now, one thing is, whose idea was it? And second, how did you see out of that thing? Because I honestly couldn't. It looked like the eye holes of the mask were like totally blocked off with like tape or cloth or something. How did you actually see out of that?
Well, when first to start how it started was I was doing the Agent Steel gimmick, but actually when I was a senior in high school, I remember I'd write down names of things, of gimmicks, and I wanted to start off as Zan Panzer, but my dad told me it sounded like a queer, so I ended up being Agent Steel. As I was doing bunch of TVs as Agent Steel, they told me, hey, you've gotten jobbed out as Agent Steel, even though Agent Steel was getting over like the Mulkeys at the time, but so I came up with that gimmick. I don't know. I can't remember how I thought. I think I might have seen a Mexican wrestling match or something. But yeah, when it was actually a sheer black material that you could see through. However, the lady that made it so thin, it was only about a half-inch wide, that I had a lot of trouble seeing through it because of how thin it was. So it was tough at times. But one thing, honestly, in training, when Nelson, we used to have to wrestle blindfolded sometimes, to take an arm drag, hammer locks, and stuff like that, to go by feel. So, sometimes obviously that won't work, but, I could see enough to work out of it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. And one added point.
No, go on.
I'm sorry, are you there?
No, yeah, go on.
I was just saying the part of it where it became the continent of Europe was where he was from was, I can't think of there was an announcer that he made up that part. So
the continent of Europe. I like that. Yeah, because he used to always say like, from Japan.
Yeah, parts unknown. Or...
Right. Now, was like the whole idea of you wearing a mask was like so you could get wrestle and get experience, but people wouldn't see you like doing a job as Brad Anderson.
Yeah, I got into it in the summer of '88, and pretty much almost all the territories were closing down. I did end up going to a couple of them and starve because they were just shutting down. But there was no real anywhere to work and get experience. So that was it. So I could get some experience, and the Anderson name and myself wouldn't get buried, which I kind of ended up doing that myself down the road. But Yeah, so, and then when I would do house matches, you'd have a good match. And even if I'd go out there as Brad Anderson, we'd still have a good match, even though, would usually lose or whatever. But
I read... Yeah, I was just saying, I read an interview with you. You said you were smarting up at the age of when you were 16. Now,
yeah.
Did your dad go out of the way to tell you it was all a shoot, or did it just never come up?
He just kept it kayfabe. I mean, he didn't go out of his way to explain, well, no, because we did this and that. But I remember one more in the 5th grade, I bet this kid at school who was a year older than me, Dad and Ollie were running an angle with Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. And I bet the kid that Dad and Ollie, they had the straps. I said, oh, they're gonna keep the straps. And he bet me that, Steamboat and Youngblood would win. So Steamboat and Youngblood won the straps that weekend. So come Monday morning, I had to ask Dad at the last second for $5 to give this kid. He blew his head. He's like, "Don't you ever do that?" But he still wouldn't smarten me up then. He just told me I'd never do that again. And in a lot of other words, though.
Right. Did he encourage you to be a wrestler, or did he discourage you anyway?
He did, and he encouraged the amateur part of it way before anything because, back in that old school, you had to be a shooter if you were ever going to be a valid wrestler or get a valid push, in the old days. I mean, because, you guys were going to try you. So, yeah, he had me wrestling since the age of 12, amateur, and I started pushing the professional thing more. That was always, he would talk down the road about it, but I made it happen sooner. And I know he made a statement to my mom one time. He felt like he got me into it too soon, and I agree with that. Today, I was way too young to be starting out in that business.
Was there ever any talks to bring you in as one of the Andersons eventually?
Yeah, the only time, actually, well, there's a couple times, but the one big time was the summer when I was wrestling, and Dusty, he stops me about midway through the summer, and Dustin, his son, and we went to high school together. We had been friends since 9th grade, and I used to always go over to their house, and I still felt like a mark over there, but Dusty Rhodes, oh my God. But he stops me in the hallway. He's like, "Kid, you've been working real hard, and see, Dustin, he's down in Florida training right now, you see, and down the road, you see, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring you in together. We're going to have Dustin Rhodes, and we're going to have Brad Anderson, and we're going to put y'all in the hood, you see, and y'all going to be like Agent Steel number 1 and 2 for a little while, and then one day, we're going to run an angle with somebody, see, and we're going to take y'all's hoods off, you see, and there it is, boom, Anderson Rhodes, the American Wrecking Crew, baby. People going to pop." And I'm sitting there, yeah, it sounds great.
Right.
And never said anything else about it. And then, 4 months later, I stopped him in Philly one time. I was like, "How's Dustin doing?" Trying to get in on it. He just kind of kayfabed me. And a couple months after that, I see Kendall Windham and Dustin Rhodes, the Young Stallions or something like that, come out. And so, obviously, that idea got canned. But that one, and then Sid Vicious, actually, back when they had a booking committee of whoever had wrestled for more than 3 months could be a booker. He was on this committee, and he had an idea to bring me in with Kevin Nash, actually, and they were going to have a gimmick called Master Blaster. And Kevin Nash is the big, monster, guy, and I'm the little small guy that gets the heat and runs his mouth and all this and that and the other. And again, talked to me about it one day and never said anything else. And, probably my part is I could have, I never followed up with those guys on that stuff. I was growing up around those guys for the most part. I was timid, because I was a fan too. And then at times when I'm in the dressing room with them, I was timid still, even though these are my coworkers or whatever you want to call it, So
right.
I was not aggressive in pursuing my career in ways like that. So.
Now, I think that's kind of pretty much based off the Beyond the Thunderdome.
Yeah,
gimmick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the gimmick they were doing with that.
Yeah, I think he did use a Master Blast name though, didn't he? He used to with Al Green, I think.
He might have done. They might have done something like that. They did, but they didn't do that gimmick with the small guy.
Right.
And you're right. They did have Al Green with that, but they didn't do the small guy, big guy gimmick. That's right.
Did you know Kevin Nash well?
Yeah, I knew Kevin Nash well. His Because actually, now the primary means of funding for my life is I own a hair salon here in Charlotte. Kevin Nash's mom was a hairstylist in Detroit, I think is where he's from. And he used to, because when I was starting out business out, he used to talk to me about that. But yeah, Kevin was always a good guy, man. I liked him a lot.
Do you do Kevin's hair?
No, but I need to.
Yeah, man. I think you and Tito Santana are the only wrestling hairstylists I know of.
Tito is okay, all right. I didn't know that, but
yeah.
I knew he had a salon. I guess that makes sense though in that business. Yeah, that was.
Or I guess maybe Brutus Beefcake, but
I think that was probably a little bit more of a gimmick. Though. I don't know if that was.
You don't use hedge clippers.
I don't use hedge clippers. No, they wouldn't. I wouldn't be in business too long like that. But.
When the Crockett's get sold, to Turner, did people treat you differently?
Yeah. Slowly, yeah. Everybody got treated differently, They started, everything started slowly moving to Atlanta. They started weeding out guys. Eventually my dad lost his job. He stayed, he had been with the Crockett's, from the time he got, hurt and couldn't work anymore, so he was doing behind-the-scenes stuff in the office, and that's what he did for Turner, and he finally got weeded out back in the December of 1990, and he died 10 months later, and I swear to this day he died of a broken heart because he was no longer in wrestling anymore, when that was all he'd done his whole life, but... Yeah, they got rid of. I mean, you've heard the horror stories about Jim Herd and all that mess. It was a debacle.
How did like the morale change? In NWA when it was sold.
Well, it was always everybody was always comparing it to. When it became WCW, they wanted to be WWE. When Turner bought it, they wanted to be WWF. They started feeding guys before wrestling and having it catered because they wanted to have this because everybody was always stooging. Hey, well, they do this in New York, and they wanted to do that. And all the guys there talked about all the money they were making in New York as compared to the very few that made money for Turner. It changed because it was just. It was a joke. I mean, in a way it was. It couldn't believe that wrestling was being run that way. I mean, the manager of Pizza Hut, is the president,
right.
Jim Herd. You're like, how does that happen? And one day, I love these guys to death, but Cornette, Sullivan, and somebody else, I'm in the car with Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas and Cactus Jack. We're going to Columbus, Georgia, and they go whipping by us, and they're doing the friggin' TV sheets in the back of the car on the way to the show. And we're talking about what angles are going to be run, and Johnny Ace he pops. He's like, oh my God, we work for $1 million company, putting out this product, and look, they're doing the stooge sheets right now in the back seat of the car for the television. and they had them out there trying to figure out segment one. I mean, you could see it was hilarious. But yeah, that's just how it was run.
Speaking of travel with these guys, do you have any good road stories?
Oh man, it depends if we need to edit them or not. But those, I'll tell you, you can just imagine. Like I said, I was out of high school 1 week, and I'm 18 years old and thrown in the room with these guys. I remember being at the first party with Bobby Eaton and Hawk and Paul Ellering, and just. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, man, I'm sitting in this room partying with a Hawk. And, and they always used to talk to me as a kid, but never treated me as an adult, like, hey, kid, And, but I don't want to incriminate too many people, but it was wild. And it's funny because so many things constantly happen. It's hard to recollect, but when I would see a guy, I'll be like, oh my God, remember when we did that? And, on any given night, any one story from the boys could be made into a movie. I mean, it just was that insane at times. It really is. There's just a bunch of kids who never grew up. Really is. Yeah,
I read in one interview he talked about Mike Shaw, he was Norman Lunatic, Bastion Booger, that he was relentless. Was he like a big ribber, or?
Oh, big ripper. I met him in Calgary when I was first up there, so I had a little bit of a background with him when he came in as Norman the Trucker, Lunatic, or whatever that. And he ribbed the guys so much, nobody wanted nothing to do with him. So I actually used to travel with him a lot and stay with him in the rooms. And he was always just ribbing guys. But he was always just constantly saying stuff that you were just laughing all the time. But he would, I remember we were sitting at the airport counter one time, and there's this like Spanish guy beside me, and Norman steals his sunglasses and puts them in my bag, and then he tells the stewardess that he saw me lift them, and then I'm in the bathroom, and the security come up and they asked me to empty my bag out, and there's these sunglasses, and they're going to try and arrest me. And I'm like, oh, what? I don't even know how these got in here. And then Norman comes up, and he was like, oh, I think, officer, I think this guy here, it's my Spanish guy, he's like, what it is I saw they were having a fight. I think they're both homosexuals. And he goes, they had an argument. He's just trying to get him in trouble talking about me. And I'm like, what are you talking? I mean, and I got, he got me out of it, but he was just unbelievable. I mean, the stuff he would shoot off with us. Now, one other quick one. One time, me, Ranger Ross, and Nick Patrick were in a car, and I won't say who it was, but one of them was smoking pot and never stopped smoking pot. And Ranger Ross was driving, and he was like the world's Boy Scout, all true blue. Right. And all of a sudden we get pulled over. We go through one of these towns where it drops from 55 to 35, and we're like shit, we're like, oh my God, rolling the windows down, trying to blow it out. And Norman's sitting in the back seat with Nick Patrick, I'm up front. Big boss hog looking policeman comes walking up. He's like, typical Southern, says the Ranger Ross, he's like, boy, you were speeding to that town, did you know you were speeding? And Norman hollers from the back, no, sir, officer, there was so much pot smoke in the car we couldn't hardly see it. And he looks in there like, you're ribbing me because you couldn't actually have pot in here and have said that, Right. And Ranger Ross about has a heart attack, and Nick is in the back. He's choking on himself, laughing so hard. I'm scared to death. But, that's his constantly, you never knew what he was going to do next.
Do you think you guys got away with some stuff, like some of the police were maybe wrestling fans, especially down south?
Well, growing up, I used to always hear those stories about how they were always getting away with stuff. That was when Charlotte was a small town. I remember getting speeding tickets when I first got my license and giving them to somebody that did security, I won't say any names, for Crockett's, and, they'd get taken care of and stuff like that. Myself, just because I was a wrestler's kid. But yeah, they got away with a lot of stuff, but I think that whole element has changed now, it's more, these guys, a cop will get some notoriety for busting somebody with a name.
Yeah, so, somebody with a name, right.
But they do something wrong.
Plus it's not as regional.
Yeah, right. So, we got away with a few things here and there.
I also read, that you were pretty nervous about wrestling Kevin Sullivan. So I wonder, what was it like taking the double stomp?
It was pretty stiff. It was pretty stiff. There was he used to scare me. Once I worked with him, he never scared me, but prior to ever working with him, because Kevin would get in there and stretch some guys that, he was old school. And Kevin gave me some great, he was on the booking committee, and I went out one time, we were in Beckley, West Virginia, and I was supposed to do a job for him, and he was running a big angle at the time, and we had a match, and, boom, 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 he's giving me a little something, and on the comeback, he shoots me out, and he says the sunset flip him on the way in. He shoots me out, and I sunset flip him, and then when I do it, he hooks me on him, and Nick Patrick actually was the referee, and he counts 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, and Nick's raising my hand, and I'm supposed to, do the job, and hadn't been wrestling long. I'm scared to death. I'm like, oh my God, something just happened, and I'm going to get fired. And Kevin pops up. He's like, oh, you stooge, you hooked me. Who do you think you are? You hooked me. I'm going to go call the office right now. And he goes, and I'm scared to death. And then, Nick's trying to raise my hand, and I'm trying to put it down, and so we get in the back, though, and Kevin's like, oh, these people, we went out there, and they thought, they knew that you were going to lose, make them think something different. But he also, I remember in the comeback, I called a monkey flip, and I didn't know. I was just trying to do something, and he taught me. He was one of the ones that taught me how to, keep my feet in the ring. And he's like, you think of Flair, Roddy Piper, Arn Anderson. You don't see these guys, you get over and stay over by keeping your feet in the ring, not doing these silly moves. And I was like, okay. And it started to sink in then, but he was a good guy. He always looked out for me a lot. I don't know why, but he did.
Mm-hmm. Someone here in our chat room, the Stalker, he just wants to know if you have any story about Lanny Poffo had said on our show about Gene trying to shoot with him in a battle royal.
I don't. Lanny, I don't. I remember him when he was here in the Mid-Atlantic area. Dad used to rib shoot with people all the time and stuff. I mean, Dad was famous. He had these little short, stubby hands, but he had like a vice grip. Mm-hmm. And, he'd either grab your elbow or come up behind you and squeeze your trap muscle, or he'd get you in the Mercy gimmick back that they used to do in the old days. And he'd be down on his knees selling, but he'd have the babyface crunching his hands, and the babyface is trying to work it like he's getting over on Dad, and he's about to die because his knuckles are about to snap in half. But Dad and Ollie used to rib guys and shoot on them. They never got. The only time Dad ever used to hear him talk about shooting on somebody was when it was like a TV match, and the guy, they was some jabroni who couldn't work. Mm-hmm. He said, you give them a spot, if they mess it up, you shoot on them.
Right.
Because you got to make your stuff look real. And so I don't know. Maybe he did on Lanny, and Lanny didn't know how to take it. I don't know.
Right. Now, I've also read, you said in interviews that you think wrestling should be stiff and snug. Do you want to explain, why you think that?
Well, just for part of the reason when I said about, what Kevin taught me, what my dad used to tell me, except I didn't listen to him because it was my dad. Johnny Valentine, say, I can't make him believe wrestling's real, but I can make him believe that I'm real. And it's so hard to explain because, Dad, they used to make one punch look real in how the babyface would sell it, as opposed to, guys just go out there throwing a million punches, and it's a different business today. I understand that, but it's, I don't know. I just don't fit in anymore.
Right. Do you still watch wrestling?
Yeah, until I get fed up with it.
So you're not a fan of the current product?
No, I'll watch a little bit. Mm-hmm. I used to love watching Benoit. I mean, he was one of the guys I first met him back in '88 in Calgary when I was up there too, and was a great guy, man. I don't know that whole deal, but if there was a Benoit match on, I'd watch it. I like to watch Steve Regal. He's a good worker.
Oh yeah.
He works. I wish I had seen it. I guess years ago he stretched Goldberg or something out there one night.
Yeah, on Nitro.
Yeah, and blew him up and all kinds of stuff. And I guess he got fired for it or something. But but he was a great guy. He's another great guy. But I don't know what it's. That those guys. I mean, it's a different style. I watch these guys, and it's like last time I worked was back in June. It's like I was telling the babyface, I'm like, look, just you give me let me sell it. Don't do anything till I feed back to you. Let me make you look good. Nothing you do looks good when I back up my feet and you're, in 2 seconds, and you have to do something else to me. And that was the whole thing. Dad and Ollie made people look good. By selling their stuff and what they would do.
Mm-hmm. What about TNA? Do you watch it? What do you think about the six-sided ring?
It's again, that part of it. At first, I was like, I think they're really missing the ball because, in my opinion, they're giving a very bad product. I don't know what they're trying to do. It's kind of like really bad WCW at the end,
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the same thing. I think, there's a market for different styles of wrestling, and that's where I think Vince's whole thing of he doesn't care about wrestling shows. I mean, he's got ECW, and that's nothing but another version of the SmackDown, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really nothing like the original ECW.
No, it's not. I mean, my opinion is you don't even have to have the WWE name on that. Let it be,
Right.
And I think there's a style for some old school wrestling to a point, in its own league. You couldn't put it on Monday Night Raw, But you could have a TNA maybe that would do that. I don't know, but I think I'm not too pleased with their product either. I can't even watch it actually.
Well, I think actually quite a few of our fans feel the same way. But
yeah, so. That old AJ Styles, I won't even go there.
Oh, you have an AJ Styles story?
Yeah, I will go there.
All right.
Last year at the Fan Fest, I'm working, and we had a suite upstairs for our hotel, like to get dressed in and stuff that Greg Price got for us. And I'm up there, and Shannon Moore's up there, he's a good kid. I knew him before he was even training with the Hardy Boys. But so I'm sitting there talking to Shannon, and AJ comes walking in, right? He's all pumped out. He's walking in like Luger used to, except he's never done what Luger's done, but anyway. So I go up to him, being all bad, hey, Brad Anderson, hey, kayfabe, man. I'm like, okay, you little smart little shit, that's fine, whatever. You're one of the boys, it doesn't matter, you're one of the boys, Right. And so he pulls out a DVD of himself doing high spots and puts it in the TV, and he's sitting there marking out on himself doing high spots. And I'm sitting there thinking, you boy, has the business changed, boy. Somebody had smartened him up that this is the work. He's actually thinking he's beating these people. And but he was so cocky. He was so I almost wanted to stretch him. I wanted to stretch him right there. And I said this year, I was like, if that son of a, I didn't want, but deep down inside I wanted to. But yeah, I'm sitting there watching him. He's marking out himself doing flips over it. He was doing some new spot where he'd jump off the top rope and do a flip and land on somebody's stomach.
Right.
And I'm sitting there thinking, one, who the hell, you think I'm going to ever lay there and let you do that? You got something coming. And two, oh yeah, that happens every time in a fight. Let me see, I'm going to knock the guy down and I'm going to climb on top of this car and do a backflip and land on his stomach. Yeah, that really happens ever. Yeah.
I always pull that out when I get into a brawl in the bar.
What's that?
I always pull that out when I get into a little brawl in the bar or something.
And you jump up on the bar table and do a somersault and backwards, and you wonder why there's no validity.
Oh man, I really can't imagine someone carrying around their own DVD. That's
that was up there. But the way it was, it's one thing to watch. Hey, let me see if I can improve myself by watching it. He's marking. He kept calling Shannon Moore over for high spots to watch him with him. He's like, Shannon, come look at this one. And I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's for real. This guy's for real. Oh my God. So he lost a lot of points with me there. Not that matters. But.
I can't imagine why.
So, how did you leave the NWA? WCW, I guess it was at the time.
I kept going in and out of there. Like, I would go to Alabama. Let's see, actually I went to Calgary first for a little while. Came back, I went to Alabama for Continental. They were really dying there. I came back, did some shows, then went out to Portland, Oregon, and I was out there for about 6 months. And I actually fractured my back out there and had to put in my notice. Came back here and rested for a little bit, and then went to Puerto Rico and ran an angle with Ricky Santana down there. Then I was broke, and I came back, and I first started out just doing a couple house shows for them, and then I started doing some more TVs, and then all of a sudden they said, well, you can't wear a hood anymore, because they didn't care if the Andersons got squashed, because I think that was when Tully and Arn went up to Vince and were the Brainbusters. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I just quit. I think I just stopped right when Dad died. I just, around then, I did a few more shows here and there for them. And actually, I went out there and just did some job matches on TV because I knew I was going to, start this hair business, and I just needed some money, And, I feel bad that I did that to the Anderson name, but yeah, I just guess walked away.
Did WWE ever, offer you a job there?
No, actually, I went up there a couple times and did jobs up there too for TV the very first year. But I went in there with the understanding they called me something different, but I was supposed to wear a hood. And then when I got there, he said, they had all these rules. Oh no, you can't wear a hood. We push hoods, and So I ended up having to wrestle as Paul somebody or something. I don't even know who it was, but it was still, me with no hood on. But no, they never, and I don't know how far. I know there was a lot of heat with Ollie and Vince. I mean, and I don't know if Dad was guilty by association there. He was a lot of the times, just because he was so faithful to Ollie that he was.
And I know Ollie and Vince, they don't like each other, I don't believe.
Not at all. And when I introduced myself to anybody I'd never met before, they're always like, "Oh my God, your dad was the greatest guy." And they'd say, "Ollie, now that was a different story." But Ollie was always, he just had his way. He was a lot harder, but. Dad was always really straight up.
I'll say one. I mean, I've heard a lot of stuff about Ollie, but when we were at the Fan Fest, he was pretty much like 7 hours a day, probably sitting in the lobby just talking to all the fans.
Yeah, you know what? He's complete. He used to scare me to death too. About 2 years ago, they had the Anderson brothers. George South ran the Anderson Brothers Classic tournament in Shelby, and saw Ollie there and hadn't seen him for years, and I didn't know what. I was afraid to go up to him and say something because the last time I had seen him was in the mid-'90s, and he was the booker, and he kept his image up, being Ollie. And so I went up to him, and he was the Ollie that was at FanFest now. He was, "Oh my God, Brett, it's so good to see you," and talking, and so he's a different guy now, I think he was wanting to keep that image up, the Ollie Anderson, Rock Anderson, so.
Right. He probably kind of realizes there's no use trying to keep kayfabe anymore, and might enjoy talking to the fans, I guess.
Yeah, because that's about all that's left now. Yeah.
Have you ever met Oh, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say it was. I love Ollie. It's tough to see some of those guys, man, physically getting that bad.
Yeah.
He was looking bad. And
it was. Yeah, it was because you sit down talking to everybody. He seemed to really enjoy himself, but when you see him walk around, it was pretty sad to see.
Yeah, it was tough to see.
I was wondering if you ever met C.W. Anderson.
Yeah, you know what? I never. Yeah. And I didn't know how to take that at first. I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's running around. I remember telling George that. I said, "George, I'm working with him this weekend. I don't know if I should stretch him or." I mean, I wasn't working with him, but he was going to be on the show. I'd never seen the guy before. I heard he went around telling everybody he's an Anderson, and I was professional with him. I didn't say, "Hey man, what are you doing?" But. I don't know. I still don't know how to think about that. Yeah. I think he shouldn't be doing it, and if he is, he should be acting more like an Anderson than just because he looks like Pie-Face doesn't mean he's an Anderson. I'm talking about Arn.
Right.
So I don't know, man. If he started making money, then I might have a problem and want a cut of it, I guess.
So there's no chance of you and CW being the new Anderson brothers or anything like that?
No, not with him. He doesn't work.
Do you think they're doing something like that, though? Bringing someone else in as one of the Anderson brothers?
I can tell you, they try to do a gimmick, and that would be the only thing to get me up and want to get involved 100% again, would be Tony Hunter ran some shows around here. He would run some good shows. He was wanting to have David Flair, Dustin Rhodes, me, and I think Bryant. Well, at the time he was going to have Tully, but he wanted to get Ollie's kid Bryant Anderson, and JJ was at the show, was supposed to manage, do a gimmick, and call it the Horseman 2000 H2O, and I would do something, even if it didn't call it the Horseman. I mean, I think there'd be a lot more, but a gimmick because of all that, the generations of history with those families there, I think would be something that people would catch on to, but that would about be the only thing that could get me off my butt to, have some. It's just such a different business today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's something that really interested you and had like some connection to, I guess.
Yeah, and had some kind of background that, that.
Do you guys kind of have like kind of a bond? You and Flair's David Flair and Dustin, since you guys kind of all grew up in the business.
Well, me and Dustin, because we knew each other so well. David, I knew as tiny kids, and then he moved away to Minnesota. with his mom when his mom and it was Flair's first wife got divorced, and then I never saw him again until he was on TV, and then I never met him again until we worked one night. And I got to say, this was funny. It was a Tony Hunter show, and it was the first night we worked there trying to do the Anderson Flair gimmick, and the finish was I had a manager who had a cane like my dad, and referee doesn't look. I take the cane and waffle Flair over the back with the cane, and cover him 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm telling Flair, I was like, look, brother, that's when I said, I'm going to lay this in here, just make sure you give me your back, so I don't hurt you, as long as you give me your back, I'm laying it in here. And he starts pacing just like he came up to me about 3 times like, no, how stiff are you going to do it? And I'm like, now I start ribbing, I'm like, oh, man, you're going to be okay, bro. I'm going to lay it in there, but I'm going to take care of you. Well, he was so nervous by the time we came into the finish that he was frozen. And so we go into it. He's supposed to be parallel to the ropes with his shoulders so I can have a clear shot. Well, he's in the corner, hugging the ropes. And I'm trying to pull him out. And, of course, we only have a few seconds here before the referee's going to turn around, and I don't want to bury him. So I'm trying to pull Flair out of the ropes, and he's not moving. And I'm like, well, I ain't going to bury myself and the referee, so I'm going to waffle him anyway. So I cracked the cane right over his back, and, it literally broke, but because of the angle, it hit one shoulder blade and then the back of his head. And all I heard was, O-F, I can't see. And he's taking a bump, and I go and cover him. He's like, I can't see. Everything's black. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing now because
right. At the time, everybody's going to scare her.
And he's like, I can't see. And he gets up after we going. He had a knot like a tennis ball in the back of his head. He had a concussion. He was wobbly. He blacked out for a minute there.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really knew him until, but it was kind of that instant thing. The same thing with the Barry Windham and, being second generation guys, you just kind of have, that you understand what your dad you went through,
Right.
So there's kind of an instant bond, It was fun. I even heard Brooke Hogan say that on watching that Hogan show one time.
Hogan knows best.
Huh?
Hogan knows best.
On Hogan's No Best, she met Davey Boy's kid, I would guess, and she's like, oh, so he's a second-generation wrestler, so he's a real wrestler and respects the business, not like those other jabroni guys. Yeah. And I was like, see, she even knows.
No, that's a good show, I have to say.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Actually gave me a different perspective on Hogan. I never really knew him, but seems like a pretty good guy.
Yeah. Since you talked about you kind of left the business stuff, do you ever, look back and wish that you dedicated yourself more to wrestling?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It was kind of a big party for me for the first few years, when I said earlier about being too young. I was more interested in hitting what bars that night and what rats we could pick up than I was wrestling. I didn't even care about anything, really, just that. And, of course, what mistakes we made or what made us what we are today, but, I wish I could have done it, but I was a young, stupid kid, in my 20s, and I thought I knew everything and didn't want to listen to anything that Dad would tell me. I remember it now, hearing it, but I never practiced it then.
Right. Do you have any sons? And if you're doing
I got
the future,
3 boys.
Okay. Do you think?
Yeah, I got 3.
You think we'll see another generation of Andersons in the ring?
I know to never say never, but I can say, gosh, unless things, I don't know. I would really want things to change to even try to get them in that direction because, really, the one thing that keeps me from getting ring is well, what for? Because, the only place to go and make money is for Vince, and that is going to happen for long. You got guys that make a few dollars for a very short term, and, I watched that thing with Benoit's dad last week on Nightline, and he said it best. He said, the company I work for, our health and welfare is the first and most thing. I wished I could have said the same thing for my son's company. And they don't care anything about you, so, and not having any other place to go, I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want to see my kids go through that.
Do you think there's room for, another wrestling company? A major wrestling company on TV?
Yeah, I guess. I think it's going to happen somehow if somebody smartens up in TNA, you know, I don't know. It's going to take somebody with a lot of money willing to lose a lot of money, I think, at first. And, you know, I don't know. I remember Dad always, when I got in the business, it was going downhill. And he used to tell me, it's like a carousel, kid. It comes around, and you know what, by the mid-'90s, it was full throttle again, and, you know, it died off after a few years, and it's still been kind of dead. And, you know, hopefully something will happen here soon that will spark something different.
Even though, you know, you were out of WCW, NWA for a long time, what was it like when, you know, if it went out of the business and WWE bought it?
With WCW, what was...
Yeah, well, I mean, what did you feel like when WWE bought WCW? I mean, you know, you kind of grew up, and even though it was a different company, it's owned by Turner now, did you ever think, you know, like, WCW would be out of business and be owned by the WWE?
You know, I started hearing the rumors near the end, but then, you know, I guess, you know, I didn't think it would ever happen, but then I guess Turner didn't have a choice. And I'd heard rumors over the years that he was going to start something back up because he loves wrestling. You know, I kind of lost so much when the Crockett's lost it, you know.
Right.
And it was kind of gone for a while, and it was just spinning in such an awful direction that I can't say I was like, oh, my God, you know, I don't know. It didn't surprise me in a way, and it did, you know, that somebody could lose that much money, but it was such a horrible product. You know, it's like anybody who, you know, knows us, we're going to put on here and push, or who wants to kiss Bischoff's rear end, you know.
Right.
So.
We sort of mentioned, you know, we met you at the Fan Fest this year, at the NWA Legends Fan Fest, and you accepted the plaque at the Hall of Heroes for your dad. Well, what have you done with that?
It is sitting downstairs with, I've got a American flag when he was buried that they put over his casket, and before I didn't add that, when Dad lost his job with WCW, Johnny Weaver, actually, and another friend of ours, Al Mandel, got him a job with the Sheriff's Department here in Mecklenburg County in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's what he was doing for the last 10 months, of his life. And he was real proud of that, but he just was, you know, I know he was missing wrestling inside, but he was proud of accomplishing that. But yeah, he had a badge and stuff, so it's in that flag, and I have it sitting downstairs beside the flag downstairs by the fireplace right now.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask this because I read this on your MySpace, you know, that you're a fan of The Sopranos. What did you think about the ending?
You know, I don't know a good way to end such a good thing. You know, I don't know. I mean, maybe I enjoyed it. I find it kind of just like, okay, you know, I thought it was all right. I know some people blasted it. I'm glad I didn't see it the night that it was live to everybody, so I heard it was kind of a mixed-up ending, and I'm glad I didn't, because I might have been like, oh, what happened just now, you know?
Yeah,
but
I was the exact same. I watched it live, and I actually did think there's something wrong with the cable. It just blacked out.
But, you know, yeah, so having heard that's kind of how it did, I kind of had a mindset of what they were going for into it. And, I don't know. It was such a good show. Any mafia movie, for the most part, I love. But I've never heard Italian say the F word so good in my life.
We're on the same page here. I mean, whenever someone asks me a favorite movie, it's hard to choose between a Godfather or Goodfellas for me.
Yeah, Goodfellas, I love it, yeah. Godfather's great, too, but hearing the F-bomb being dropped so many times in Goodfellas, or even Scarface, too.
Oh, yeah.
The Cuban version.
Well, we want to thank you for coming on tonight. Anything you want to tell everybody out there?
You know, I appreciate whoever's listening here tonight. If sometime down the road, I'd love to come back on again, think of questions, because like I said, there's so many things that have gone on that you can't remember them until someone brings part of it up. So any questions about anybody ever, I'd be glad to come back on and talk to you guys again, and it was my pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on.
All right, Jack.
Yeah, it was an hour. We had you on here for an hour.
All right.
This is Gold Dust from Hollywood, California, or Dustin Rhodes, the son of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. We are taking over the rest of business, and you have been listening to In Your Head Online.